They're going to be in real trouble, and people have got to think through that very carefully between now and then. In the absence of electrical power, the best way to keep your family warm is probably a wood-burning stove. If you can't afford that, then a kerosene space heater. If you can't even afford those, then at the very least get adequate clothing, even sleeping bags and blankets, and that'll keep you warm. You may not be very comfortable, but you'll get through it.
The status of the power grid should be of particular concern to all of us, since so much of the infrastructure of the nation depends on it. The question is fairly asked: can we survive a major, long-term power shutdown?
You want to have all those things with which you would stay warm in a winter where there may be no electric power. If the utilities go down, you want to have a wood stove. You want to have a backup generator if possible. You want to have flashlights. You want to have candles. You want to have kerosene lamps. You want to have blankets. You want to have warm clothes.
If there are failures in utilities, the protection for that is to be sure that you've got a backup source of heat and light. You know, we don't really need electricity. What we really need is heat and light. So some candles and some extra firewood, or a camp stove, or a gas grill, those kinds of things can solve those problems for you.
It's easy to agree that a backup for heat and lights is a good idea, but not every option is available to every family. Is there a way to determine what's best for you? And shouldn't we be exploring these options now, rather than when it's 30 below zero?
When this particular problem could occur is going to be in January, not in the middle of summer when it could be pleasant and people might take it in stride. What we're going to see is maybe it'll occur during a time when we're actually facing a deep freeze kind of condition here in Colorado or Minnesota. So to respond to these kind of problems, people are looking at what do I do to take care of my heating and lighting under those kind of conditions. So what they're doing is evaluating what kind of, say, solar options or wind options or generator options might be the most appropriate, and how do they go about getting those options put in place.
But wait a minute, we're talking about a sizable investment. What if we never really need a backup generator?
We have fire insurance on our homes, not because we expect a fire, but it's just prudent to be prepared in case there is one. In that same spirit, we need to think through carefully, what are we going to do if, in fact, we don't have power? And not just for a few hours, but maybe it's days or weeks.
The vast majority of Americans are totally dependent on electrical power supplied by various utility companies, virtually all of which are tied to the national power grid. A personal power generator can provide a limited amount of power for a limited time, but care should be taken. Generators can be expensive, temperamental, and noisy. The power itself is usually not clean. That means it induces spikes and surges that can damage most modern equipment. Then there's the matter of fuel. Stored in large quantities, these fuels can be hazardous. Gasoline does not store well over the long term, and diesel fuel is particularly vulnerable to cold temperatures. Propane is probably the best choice, but it will require a rather large capacity tank to be of much use. In any case, know the risks and what you can expect to operate with a generator before you invest in one. Low-tech solutions such as wood-burning stoves, kerosene heaters, and propane lanterns, cook stoves, and refrigerators may prove to be a safer and more manageable alternative. And no matter what happens, they're a good insurance policy. As Jim Lord said, we really don't need electricity. What we need is heat and light.
So how do I work within my budget to make sure that I can keep my house warm and keep some source of light? Your number one way to produce light at the lowest amount of cost is a candle. The only problem with a candle is you have an increased chance of potential fire. So if you use candles, make sure you use safety candles and do them within containers, glass containers like a lantern. In the case of heat, a lot of ways you can do it. Many areas of the country that homes are equipped with wood-burning stoves or fireplaces, and just cut a couple extra cords of wood. You can also buy cans of Sterno, little cans that you put under chafing dishes. You'd be surprised the heat that a little can of Sterno will give off.
The fact is, many Americans already have a lot of the tools they'll need to keep going in an emergency. The trick is to put them to a little different use.
The neat thing about Americans is we love to camp. Most of us have sleeping blankets, a stove, a lantern. We have many of the tools that a person needs to be able to camp out within the walls of their home. What a refreshing idea. A convenience store in your own home where you have all the wonderful stuff that you'd like to eat. that you normally eat, the comfort foods, the candies, the whatever that you're used to having. You have them at home. Plus, you now have a camp stove, a camp lantern, and just learn how to camp out within the walls of your home for as long as you have to.
Another of the key elements in any preparedness program is financial planning. As in all areas of personal and family well-being, the time to make decisions is before the crisis hits. But what is the prudent thing to do? Can we rely on the financial institutions?
Well, in Y2K, you have to remember what money is all about, and I think it's important to get the goods that you need for Y2K before you concentrate on the medium of exchange to buy those goods. Such goods that will be in short supply and necessary for survival would be, for example, food, water filters, tools, spare parts for your tractor or your truck, warm clothing, medicine, things like that. Once you've stocked up on basic supplies of these necessary items, then I think you can move into the medium of exchange, which would be cash, junk silver, and then gold.
What we recommend for some financial concerns is, of course, preparedness. If you have done really good preparedness and you stocked up on food and water and perhaps paid some of your bills in advance, you are less likely to need to go to the bank during the height of the crisis. And then after a certain period of time, most of the financial systems should be back up again.
To protect yourself from really significant disruptions in the financial system, what I suggest people do is to have some cash set aside. I recommend about 3 months' living expenses in the form of cash. I recommend a similar amount in gold and silver coins. And if Y2K ends up not being a very serious problem after all, then throw a party. Now, you haven't lost anything if you've got cash and gold and silver. So that is a solution for any kind of economic calamity. That'll protect you against anything that might happen.
Given the state of computer art in the world today, most financial transactions are bits and bytes, flying through the ether or embedded in silicon in a computer somewhere. So what can we do about that?
The Y2K crisis will affect the financial community most of all. It is important to gain permanent paper financial records in the fall of 1999 of your important financial transactions, bank accounts, real estate records. Any type of legal transaction or financial record should be acquired and put in your year 2000 file. The provision of a few $1,000s, enough money to buy food, gas, walk-around money during that period would make a great deal of difference in minimizing the disruptions in the year 2000.
The experts all agree that each of us should have a certain amount of cash on hand, as well as some gold and silver if possible. And it's also essential to have a hard copy of all important financial documents in your personal file. Is there anything else?
When you're talking about economic uncertainty, the number one rule is diversification. And don't do any one thing with your money. Put a little in each area. There's a great amount of wisdom when you talk about diversification in assets. Regardless what happens during Y2K, your money's going to make it through to the other side.
And what of the other institutions we've come to take for granted over the years? Hospitals, for example, and the healthcare system in general. If emergency services are no longer available, will you be able to care for your family's needs?
Y2K could throw the American medical system into gridlock. Therefore, I think you need to have some backup systems.
Do you know how to build or buy a complete home medical emergency kit? What items do you want to make sure you have? More importantly, perhaps, will you know how to use what's there in the case of a medical emergency? You may be more capable than you think you are. Learn more when we come back. Financial needs are important, but they will quickly fade into the background if we lack the health and strength to keep going.
A lot of people overlook the fact that one of the most important things that they can put aside is medical supplies. For instance, people with special needs like diabetics need to make sure that they acquire adequate supplies of insulin, for instance, to take care of them for several months.
One of the important things for those of us who have medication, who have prescribed medications we have to take in order to maintain our life and our lifestyle is somewhat difficult to handle because you can get about a month's prescription if you're under managed care. I would suggest everyone that they go to their doctor and indicate to them that if their life depends on that medication, they'd like to have an extended prescription period. They may have to pay for it out of their pocket, but they have a right, indeed they have an obligation to themselves and to their family to ask for extended prescriptions. You may have to fight for them, you may have to threaten